Okay, we're beginning. Daf. It's always the movement of the Svarim. Okay, Rebelli Stefanski, and there's also Rebelli Langer. So you had a good question. Where's Daf Aleph?
Yeah.
Just gives me a baseline of where you're holding in Shas.
Right.
And it's a great question. We do it so the children should ask. Okay? So we're learning here Masechtas Nazir. And Nazir deals with the vow that someone takes upon himself to restrict certain items. And we'll learn, or actions, we'll learn about what that is. But it's appropriate that we're learning Nazir, which follows Masechtas Nadarim, which is also a vow, similar concept, and it's related. It's not coming out of left field. Did you see the video of Rebelli Stefanski sitting with a Nazir today?
No.
Yes, he sat down with an actual Nazir for the last 5 years. Long, flowy black hair. A fellow who has written Sfarim. His wife became a Nazira. Is that the term?
Really?
And he says there's a certain holiness associated with it, like we know in the Torah.
So wait, he doesn't drink wine and he doesn't cut his hair? Is there anything else I'm missing?
Oh, that's a great question. There is also, you're not allowed to come in contact with a human corpse. But
so you
yes.
can't go to bias?
So
You just
there's
can't touch it.
right. So I think he took on a certain type of Naziris, maybe it's like called Nazir Shimshin or something. So there are maybe certain relaxations or different restrictions or things like that. Fellow who sold his company for $900 million is calling my phone. What should I do?
In middle wow. See, it's only, by the way, you know what?
See, it's a horror.
By the way, there's so much hatzlacha that comes when you just open up you open up the Gemara, you get good jokes come to you. You get business.
Yes. I just received a phone call from a fellow who sold his company for $900 million, and Binyomin was just mentioning, they say if you want business, you should open a sefer.
Yeah, the Yitzhar loves to run. You know a man named Ari Rudman?
Yes.
So he used to give a shiur in Rabbi Center's yeshiva in Adaris Torah, titled "The Tricks of the Yitzhar." And he had a lot of good tricks. He knew all the tricks of the Yitzhar because he at one point had to go through all those tricks, but then he became such an expert in the tricks. He gave a shiur, and one of these, one of the tricks is where he gets you into a certain place, but a good one is the fact that he doesn't want you to learn. So do anything, even if it's to give you some parnasa.
I find that the Yitzhar, whenever I beat him, he levels up. The next lore is always better than the first.
Did you lose by answering?
I wanted to be respectful, my Yitzhar said, so you pick up. So he distracted me for about 20 seconds in between, but we'll get right back into it. So yeah, there's certain types of Naziris I learned from Rebelli Stefanski, and we'll see what the Mishnah and Gemara has to say here on Daf Beis Amud Aleph in January 2023. So it says, Kol Kinuye Naziris K'Naziris. So what is a Nazir? A Nazir is someone who says, I am a Nazir. Not that I'm actually making myself a Nazir, but
that's what
he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And he is now required to stay away from wine. We'll see what that means. If any benefit, can he buy it and sell it? We'll see. Mm-hmm. And cutting his hair, and he's also not allowed to come into contact with a dead body.
Very simple, 3 things.
Right. And you need to actually state clearly that you can't think it, you have to actually verbally state it. So let's talk about what do you need to articulate in order to do that. So the Mishnah says that all types of terms for Naziris are effective, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to see later on in the Mishnah, I believe, that there are different terms, different words, such as nazik or naziach, that reference this. Ha'omer ehe, if someone says, I shall be, but he doesn't say exactly what he doesn't finish the sentence, but within that context, he's referring to Naziris, right? Someone says, do you know Naziris, they have long flowy hair, and he says, you know what? And he says the term, ehe. So
it had to come after someone started.
There has to be some relevancy, and I think the Gemara will talk about it, that there's what the Gemara calls, or it's referred to as a yad. Yeah, a handle. Like if Binyomin's picking up a coffee cup, he's holding it by the handle. So you're not actually holding the cup, but you took it upon yourself with ehe that I shall be, and it's evident from that partial declaration that you're referring to.
It's not like when someone says "what the," he's saying like his whole sentence. It's very evident.
I mean, it's similar in that sense.
If it was in the context.
It's the context, right. So it's like I shall be. What do you mean? What? Oh, we were talking about Nazirs. Okay, it's clear from that. So the Mishnah says Harei zen Nazir. Or ehe noeh, he says, I shall be handsome. And I assume, if you ever see in the shampoo commercials, they what's the word? Not predict. They position or whatever it is, men with long flowy hair. And there's the reason they do that is there's a sense of handsomeness associated with long flowy hair. It was probably very more popular back in the olden days or whatnot. Long flowy hair. Kings had long flowy hair. Today we're better groomed, but there's a handsomeness to that. So the Mishnah says Nazir. He's a Nazir. Nazik, Naziach, Paziach. If someone says I shall be a Nazik, a Naziach, or a Paziach, Hareza Nazir. He is a Nazir. I presume we are going to see where these terms come from, perhaps, but these are similar to those terms. Hareini Kazev, someone says, I am hereby like this, or Hareini Misalsel, or I'm hereby to be Misalsel, Hareini Michalkel, Marie Michalkel, Harei Alai L'Shalech Pera, or he says, it's incumbent on me to grow tresses. We'll see what that means. Harei Zeh Nazir. Those are also terms that will validate or activate his nazirs. Harei alai tzipurim. If someone says, it's upon me an obligation of tzipurim, birds,
which are the karbanos you have to bring after you
Oh, is that what it is?
Finish becoming your nazir?
Yeah, those are the karbanos that after your naziris you have to bring a carbon. Okay, Meir Omer Nazir. This declaration of the obligation of birds is enough. But the Chacham say this declaration that someone took upon him about the obligation of birds is not enough to qualify someone a Nazir, and he is not a Nazir. The Gemara in Gimel Amud Aleph will discuss this machlekes in detail. So
I can't wait.
Talk to Gemara. Michti. Let us see. Tana b'seder nashim kari. The Tana's current point of reference is nashim, right?
So we're talking. Why is this question just like why is Nazir in nashim? And why did we put this masechta here?
Right. I guess there's an order of the different Shishay Sirah Mishnah. One of them is nashim.
What's Nazir have to do with women?
And I presume Nashim has within it Nazir. Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay. My time, Tani Nazir. What's pshat? What does this have to do with?
Do we know
women?
The Masechtas in Nashim?
I don't know the Shishay Sridha Mishnah by heart or what each one holds.
Right.
If you look at the karbanis that you mentioned, right? Taisus, I think, talks about this, but if you look at the different Shisha Sridha Mishnah, Kachim deals with karbanas, so maybe Kachim should be a better fit for Masechtas Nazir.
Exactly.
And for the Gemara, Tani Akroi Kai, the Tana's point of reference is a pasuk dealing with a halacha pertaining to women. What does the pasuk say? It says, "V'hoya im loy simtzachein be'inav ki matzav ervas davar." If it transpires that she does not find favor in his eyes, because he has discovered concerning her a matter of adultery. And this is what the Tana is saying by teaching that Nazir is in say the Nashim. Mi goram lo lavera. What caused her to commit this avera? Yayin. Her drinking the wine caused her to be adulterous. The Ka'amar, and the Tana says by putting it, by teaching Masechtas Nazir, Kol haroya soita b'kol kula, whoever sees a saita in her disgrace, Yazer atzmai min hayayin, should restrain himself by way of making a vow that a Nazir does from wine. So since this Naziris is a reaction to a Saita, thereby, that's why the Mesechus Nazar is located within Seder Nashim.
As is Nedarim and Sota.
Interesting. You think why? It's because of that.
Seems similar. What do you make in that?
The wine,
Well,
maybe it's
Sota makes sense.
Yeah,
Sota's part of
Sota
this.
makes sense. But I mean, Nedarim based off of this as well, right? If you're going to make a neder after seeing a sight in her disgrace, then all the more so. It should also be in Nashim. Okay. So there's something interesting in the Mishnah's arrangement, and the Gemara is going to point it out. Pasach b'chinuyin u'mefarash yadais. The Tana of the Mishnah opens with a statement that the law of yadais, these equivalent terms, these partial declarations, he talks about the terms that are
the kinuyin are like nicknames.
Kinezirish. Oh, the nicknames. Okay.
And then it goes and explains the yadais.
Right.
So, right.
Meaning, why does it go into
general.
yadais? If you started talking about nicknames, say what the nicknames are.
Yeah.
We're not up to yadais yet.
Right. Say nizik.
Right. Say Haziach, Naziach, Nazik.
Yeah. Right.
You know, you speak about the nicknames. Stick with the nicknames. Now you're talking about yadais. Omar Rava. So Rava says, I hear the question. We some make kidei, and some say it may not have been Rava, but we don't know who. It was not identified.
Oh no way! I used to think Kadi was a guy's name.
Is that true?
Wait, I don't know. Is that what does it say there? V'yitema Kadi. I always remember.
It says
some say
without
it's Kadi.
attribution. Kiddi.
Oh man, I hope some Mefarish does say somewhere that the person's name is Kadi.
Okay, there is a little bit down here that yes. You are correct. For those still listening to our live share on the voice memo, yes, some say that Kedi means without attribution, but the Marshal and the Be'er Sheva state that Rashi often renders Kedi as the name of one of Chachamim.
Awesome.
So you are not incorrect. And there,
Right,
it's quite a lengthy note for those that have the art scroll can learn more about it. Okay, so what does Rava or Kedi or some other sage say? Kol kinui naziris kinaziris vidois naziris kinaziris ve'elohein yadais ha'emer ehe hare zeh nazir. He says no. The Mishnah should be read like this: all kinuyim for naziris are like naziris and the yadais of naziris. Or I apologize. All kinuye are just like Naziris, and all the yadais, the partial declarations of Naziris, are like the complete, are just like the kinuye and the word Nazir. And what are those partial declarations? If someone says Ehe, I shall be, he is a Nazir. So
You're probably
rearranges-
already thinking the question. I think we're all ready.
What would you say the question is?
So it's still going out of order, right?
It's saying all kinuye.
Started with Kinuyim, and then it's like all Kinuyim Naziris is Kinaziris, and Yadis Naziris is Kinaziris. So then say Eluhain Kinuye. It's still going back to the second thing.
You're right. It doesn't really fully answer this question.
And I think maybe the Gemara is about to ask that.
Okay, so let's see. Lefresh Kunei Bereisha. Let the Tana explain the first, what these
Why are we jumping the
similar
gun?
nicknames are before you go into the Yadais. Tana Me'ahu Desalik. It's the style of the Tana that he explains the most recently mentioned subject. And what is that? Hamufarish Reisha. So that's the one he explains first. So where you have two things that are discussed, like in our Mishnah, the last one to be mentioned is the first to be illustrated. Sometimes you'll have that in Rashi and Chumash, where he'll say, I'll answer, I have two questions, and he answers the second question first. Sometimes I think you'll see it the other way, but it's a style more than
Kind of
it
like
is.
the Yaakov Esav,
In what sense?
Yaakov was conceived first, and then Esav. But then when they came out, Esav came out first,
yes,
and then Yaakov.
Yes,
Sometimes orders switch.
And it's in the Gemara's usage, it's more style than it is, which is interesting. Like, why is the Gemara so busy with how the Mishnah is structured. Like that's the way the Tana chose to speak, right? Like the premise of the question. Where does that come from? That we're bothered why the Mishnah decided to structure it a certain way, and then by the way, the answer is because that's the style. You know what I mean? Like so. Did we not know?
Honestly, the question is better, I think.
Yes.
Meaning, it's a good question.
Right.
And then the question is, I don't understand the style. You're saying it's a style, but
right.
Then you have to explain someone's style. That's
We're not saying that's why there's no attribution. It's a good answer too for all those that. Okay. Fine. Okay. So let's see where this style is typical, and we're going to talk about a few different precedents for this. Kiditznan. We learned in the Mishnah b'meh madlikin b'meh ein madlikin.
Back when I davened Ashkenaz.
Okay, so there we go. He's a Kagavna guy. And we have a Mishnah, right? Someone says, what does the Mishnah say? What can you light a lamp on Shabbos with, and what may you not light?
And then it goes and explains, and
ein madlikin, right? And we learned in another Mishnah in Shabbos, Bameh toimnin ubameh ein toimnin. What can we insulate hot foods on Friday so that they stay warm on Shabbos? Ooh. And what may we not insulate them?
Wow.
There
you go. I was just doing Hatzmana with my daughter today.
Doing Hatzmana. Insulation for what? It's a Wednesday night. What? Oh, were you talking about the Lamed Tasmalach?
Yeah. We got this book, Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Good name.
Have you ever seen it?
No, I haven't seen that.
It's with it's like real pictures with like little Yingel. Like doing things, and then the picture says it's like green if it's allowed to do it on Shabbos and red if it's not. Anyways, you know how like when you do two things that like you learn two topics and
then they integrate with each other,
converge.
Converge.
It means that you're having siyata d'shmaya.
Yes, interesting. They say also when you open a siddur to their exact spot, there's a certain level of siyata d'shmaya. So in this case, in another case, it explains what you're not supposed to insulate first, even though it mentioned it second. And then a third Mishnah, Bameh isha yotze v'ameh ein yotze, with what may a woman go out and what should she not go out. This is another Mishnah later in Shabbos when it talks about the Isser of carrying things in a Reshus HaRabim or from one domain to another. What is a woman allowed to wear outside of her home on Shabbos? And the Mishnah there explains, what does it explain first? What a woman may not go out with. So we see here three instances in which the Mishnah explains first the most recently discussed item. Okay?
I bet in all three of those places, the Gemara asks, why did it do that? And then it brings the other three that says, because in these three it does.
It could be. For those listening in, please submit. Let us know if you can look it up. And maybe Michdi is mentioned there as well. Michdi?
Kadi.
Okay, so we just discussed last mentioned, first explained. Now the Gemara has a question. You say it's written in stone, such a style in the Mishnah. Let me tell you, V'hatnan, we learned in the Mishnah, when an animal goes out on Shabbos, what type of gear can this animal wear? When it leaves, it's Rishos HaYachid. And the Mishnah there explains a camel may go out first, right? So you got so busy telling me it's the second thing going out first. Here it talks about the first things discussed first. And again, it reminds me of the Rashi and Chumash, which has back and forth. And the Gemara cites another Mishnah. Not only that, it's not just the behema coming out first that's discussed. There are those who inherit and bequeath, those who inherit but don't bequeath, and manchilim and those who bequeath but don't inherit, and and those who neither inherit nor bequeath. The Mishnah there explains these inherit and bequeath first, which is mentioned in our Reisha first.
I mean, that one makes sense, because there we just gave like 4 scenarios. So then you'd go so confusing if then you want like 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I do hear that. But at the very least, you do have a couple of scenarios, some stronger than others, according to Harav Binyomin Swerdlik. That said, this contradicts the style you mentioned previously, the 3 cases in Shabbos. Interesting. The first 4 cases we're Masechta Shabbos. Where's this last Mishnah? Is in Bava Basra. Okay, so the first, this Bava Basra Mishnah that has 4 different cases. That's one thing, but you do have state in a Gemara in Shabbos, a Mishnah in Shabbos, right? It's the same, even within the same Masechta, that it has a divergent style. Ela lo elam tani hachi v'tani hachi. So this that you see, there's 2 different patterns. The Tana is teaching you either this way or that way.
Meaning there's different styles. Both are good styles.
Ela Hassan, but there in the 3 Mishnahs in which the second question is first answered, the Isurei de Nafshehu. That is an Isser, is a personal Isser, applying to oneself. Mifaresh Isurei de Nafshehu. There, so the Tana sees fit to explain the personal Isser first. So why? Because personal Issers, one could say they're taken more seriously by people, and therefore the Mishnah prioritizes that. And that's why it discusses it first. So what is the Gemara here saying? Is it saying that that it teaches, it's not saying that sometimes it teaches this way and sometimes it teaches that way without reason. The reason, right, it's saying, it looks like that from at the start, but it says
the reason, explaining why sometimes
it's sometimes this and sometimes this is not.
So really, there is one style,
arbitrary.
And the reason why we sometimes will not stick to that style is if it's Isur D'Nafsheh.
Or, better put, there is no style, but it depends on what what is more chashiv to the person reading the Mishnah. So the Tana will say, okay, this is a personal Isser, so I'm gonna mention this first. But I don't know if in another case where there is no personal Isser, why a Tana would pick one over the other. Or we usually explain the first thing first. In all cases, the questions relating to the Isser is asked after the question concerning the permitted one. For example, Mishnah says, well, maybe light and what maybe not light. Aha. So you're right. Take that back, Rabbi Isai. I apologize. It's the first error of the new era. When you say first and second thing, you explain the first thing first. But when that second thing is a personal Isser, the Tana is going to prioritize that in the explanation phase of the Mishnah.
So normally you actually go 1, 2, then you go back 1, 2.
Yeah.
Unless it's a personal Isser, which I'm not actually sure what that means. Then it goes 1, 2, 2, 1. So is our Mishnah a personal Isser? Yes, right?
Kol Kinui, I have to go back. Kol Kinui Naziris Kinaziris.
Well, it was actually a Chesur Nefzer B'Hachi Tani, right? It was Kol Kinui Naziris. It was really in the Gemara in the middle of Kol Kinui Naziris Kinaziris. B'Yada is Naziris Kinaziris. B'Elohin Yadais, right? So it did a 1, 2, 2, 1. And you're saying the reason why it said B'Elohin Yada is because that is
a personal Isser. That's Isur D'Nafsheh.
So what does personal Isser mean? As opposed to what?
For starters, a woman going out is considered an Isser for herself, for the person. When it gets to the behemoth, it's not going to say it's a personal Isser. That's on the... Then again, why would in the case of the camel... Right, in the case of the behemoth,
you're not allowed to put something on the camel.
Right, but I don't think it's a personal Isser. Like it's not. I think a personal Isser means not that you will or won't get the Avera. Right, if it's your camel, I think you're over. Right, I think it has to do with more about your personal being.
Yeah,
that you're the one who's wearing the ornament. You're the one. Right,
the Gavra.
Right, and the Gavra, if it's an Isser on the Gavra, then I mean, I guess the being, the guf, you know.
Yeah, it's more personal.
Right. It hits closer to home.
Sure.
So now the Gemara is going to explain. Maybe we touched on this. Why in the Mishnah about the animals, what the animals. Yeah. So the Gemara asks. right now you have an animal, what they could and cannot wear on Shabbos, and it goes in. It doesn't start with the isser of the animal. Gabe behema, or it does, but Gabe behema, in regards to the animal, there's Surya Ade behema huda ase, where by the way of the animal, the isser comes about. Mefarish hetre beresha. The Mishnah explains the heter first, right? Because it's the behema itself that the Adera is coming about. It's not coming out from the actual person. So that's why it starts with the heter as opposed to that more personal being, the Surya de Nafshe, like it does by an Isha, for example.
I can't say I 100% understand why, though. Like, I get the style. You're kind of just telling me. It's more of like a fact that I'm just absorbing than understanding why that should be a differentiator.
Right. So article note 38 says, the question relating to the permitted situation was asked first and answered first. And that's because the isser against allowing one's animal to carry is of relatively less concern to people. There is thus no reason for the Mishnah to give the Isser situation priority in the explanation, and accordingly the Mishnah chooses to discuss the permitted situation first. Now, why is it of relatively less concern to people? The Isser is not on the animal, the Isser is on the person to use the animal, but for some reason, people, rightly or wrongly, are less concerned about their behema as they are to an isser that affects and impacts their actual
okay, so I'm starting to understand this better. It's not necessarily what was first or second. It's let's tell you what you're not allowed to do first before telling what you're allowed to do. So it's like, what is the woman allowed to go out with? What hat is she allowed to wear?
It's more about
isser, it's a personal isser.
Right.
So it's gonna say, oh, you're not allowed to do this, that. You are allowed to do
right. So it's both things. It's going to start with the things that you're not allowed to do, so you don't do an isser
when it's personal.
In addition to when it's applicable to you. I think it's like both components, right? Like this idea that the reason it starts with what's usser before the heter is so you're right. It's only of utmost importance. It only has a priority when it's a personal has a personal connection to you and
therefore we'll put it out of order.
Right.
But by the gummel, we'll do the regular order and we're not worried. We're not going to start with things you can't do because it's not this personal isser.
And the reason it's of more concern to people is because it has to do with them.
Yeah. Right. Like, I guess it makes sense that you're probably more concerned with what you're going out with than what your camel's going out with. Like how often you get to dress them up on Shabbos, maybe. I don't have it.
I don't know if that plays a role into it. But I also don't have a camel. Not yet. We are now turning over to Daf Beis Amid Beis in our journey through Mesechtes Nazir. Gabe yesh noichlin. The Gemara now explains why the Mishnah about Yerusha inheritance explains the topics in the order they are initially mentioned, right? Let's see, maybe it was because, as we learned on Amud Aleph, Binyomin thought that maybe because there are 4 different topics discussed, that if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, we're going to have a brain of cholent pot. It's going to be all a mishkabah.
You're going to have
a hatmana. Oh, it's going to be insulated. Gabe yesh noichlin nami mefarish ikar nachla bereisha. The reason we structure the Mishnah, it's like that, it makes sense, because the Tana explains first the basic law of inheritance before discussing deviations from the norm. So therefore, the first mentioned category was Nachla. So let's talk about the one who inherits and bequeaths. If you're going to start talking about, the more intricate parts of what not, what this one, first talk about the actual basic law, and that is those who inherit and bequeath. Those who can inherit from the previous generation, and those who can bequeath to the next generation.
You're saying it's very easy to understand someone who is able to inherit and also bequeath.
Right. Imagine
most people, I think, fall into that bucket. That
yeah,
bucket.
but I don't know if it's a roiv. I think it's just the basic.
It's a pretty standard case, right? A person has a parent, has a child.
Yeah, but I don't think it's like based off of standardness. I think the Gemara is saying that the reason we're going to go after this first, this is the most simple. This is the basic before you start saying this yes, that no, this one, that, like
right.
This person can walk and run, fine. This person can walk, but he can't run. Like it wouldn't make sense, especially in the Sam I Am books or the, Bob can walk, Joe can run. It's starting very basic first.
Right.
Elahacha. Lifreish kinuye bereisha. So, but here in our Mishnah, we have a problem. Why does the Mishnah discuss these yadais before talking about the kinuye? Why are you telling me what the yadais are, this ehe, before you tell me what the nicknames are? These pezuach.
You're saying because that's like the standard. That's like the walking and the running. Is that what it's trying to compare it to? It's saying like the standard case is not all of a sudden yadais.
Right, correct.
The
yes.
nickname is much more
I
closer
agree with that.
to the actual.
Correct. Like you're getting a little bit further away. And my question to you, Binyomin, though, is this going on the original
reading of the Mishnah,
or that
I'm assuming that we're
Metzra?
Going back to the Chesur Metzra, I think. Once we have that.
Because let's go back to the Chesur Metzra to see how it was worded. Sometimes I lose focus when the Gemara goes off on a tangent and then goes back, that I have to turn multiple pages back to better understand what it is referring to. So, for those that are keeping track at home and have a scorecard, Rava or Kedi or some other unknown Tana, Amira said that the Mishnah's text is missing, and it should read that all kinuye for Naziris are like Naziris, and all yadais for Naziris are like complete declarations of Naziris, and these are the partial declarations. Right. So that's the question. It's going off the Chesur Metzra clearly, or at least for sure, because you said Naziris are like, are like all the kinuye are like Naziris, and all the yadais are like Naziris. Oh, and here are the yadais. Whoa, yadais? That's like what would you compare it to? That's like inheriting but not bequeathing. It's like walking but not running. Why are you starting with these?
Do you know that your shirt says walk, run?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Wow. We are literally... This is your Siyata Deshmaya right here.
Right. Wait, maybe you were the one who referenced it. Oh, was I?
You started with the walk and run.
And I didn't even realize that. But yes, I am wearing a T-shirt that says walk, run, and wheel as part of an organization. But that is very interesting. So we are now going to find an answer as to why the Mishnah, at least in this Rava or Kedi, why was it structured like this? Elahainu tam. This is the reason for the order. Yadais hoil v'asyan le midrasha. Yadais, since their effectiveness is learnt out from a drasha of a pasuk and would otherwise not be obvious, chavivinly. They're precious to the Tana because of that novelty. So therefore, he treats them before the kinuye, whose effectiveness is a bit more pashit, and doesn't need a drasha from a pasuk. Very interesting. It's true, you're much more quick to say a dvar Torah that you came up with, that you thought of, than maybe something you've heard from a friend. Not that the Torah is a friend, but you understand the chavivus towards that, which it's a nice warm answer.
It is warm. It's nice to start off with an like this.
Yes. the liftach. Okay, so that the yadais
if it's
are
so
given priority,
chavivin.
if they're so pashit,
No, not pasha.
if they're so precious,
yeah.
the liftach behind bereisha, let them start with the top first, without even looking at the answer. I'd say they're chaviv, but like you still have to explain the basicness of in the beginning. Let's see what the Gemara says. Tana ki maskal. And the Tana begins matchel beikar carbon. He begins with the basic carbon, the ikar carbon, the inyan purushe, but with respect to explaining mefarish yadis bereisha, he explains the yadis first because they are precious. So you have to start with the basic formula first, and then once it comes to the explaining, that's when you can deviate from the order as a result of something that is precious to you. Clear?
Sounds good. I always forget. Is it Nadarm or this is real Rashi, right? We're not like
Nadarm has it
Ran.
switches to the Ran.
Okay,
There might be another Masechta also where that's impacted, but I do believe that this is real Rashi. Oh, run, beautiful. It keeps coming back to the walk and the run. Well, Rabbi said, let's run straight into the next sugya. If someone says, I shall be, the Mishnah says he is a Nazir, a full-fledged Nazir. And that means he does have to bring the karbanis. Because if someone has any doubt as to whether he's a Nazir, you are not allowed to bring the karbanis. And the reason is because it's not warranted, and it's usher to shech any chulin ba'azara. Okay, so now, dilma ehe b'sainis kamar. Perhaps he's saying, I'm not saying I shall be a nazir. I mean to say I shall be in a state of fasting. Why?
Wasn't this all about what was just happening in the previous context of the conversation?
I would imagine so. I mean, that was what I pontificated. That's what I presumed. Context is important, right? Like, imagine he's wearing a T-shirt that says Nazar in it, and then he says Ehe. Maybe that's the case. I don't know exactly, but why are we so quick to rush to? Why are we quick to assume that it means a Nazar? Especially if you're not allowed to bring karbanis and there's real tangible isurin involved with that, shouldn't we have 100% clarity? And why is the Mishnah banking off an assumption? Amar Shmuel says, the Mishnah refers to a case in which a Nazir was passing in front of him while he made his declaration of I shall be. But if it was a fast day, no, I'm just saying, like, I guess context is important. Meaning,
so the tinus is because he's fasting from grapes, right? That's all that. Is that what that means?
Oh, I think the Gemara is saying that that he says I shall be. How do you know it means I shall be a Nazir? Maybe he's saying I shall. I'm taking upon myself.
Could have been
fast.
anything.
Yeah, or I shall be a superhero one day.
Got it.
Right?
Got it. It just shows tinus. And the answer is context. So we kind of already spoke about this, but that's the answer.
Right. Meaning, if a Nazir wasn't walking in front of him and someone walked in front of him who took upon himself a tinus, maybe in that case, ehe would be enough.
No.
Sarach in gadol.
Look at Masechtas Tanis.
So I've learned Masechtas Tanis. I don't remember that, but my memory is vague. We shall get there in 6.5 years. Okay, so Gemara talks about Shmuel's answer. Lemek Savar Shmuel. Shall we say that Shmuel hold that Yadayim She'ena Meichiches, that a yad is a partial declaration? But what about a partial declaration that's unclear, it's ambiguous? Do we say that Shmuel holds that ambiguous yad, loihavyon yodayim, are not valid yadais? If Shmuel held that even unclear yadais are effective, then when someone says I shall be, should have been a valid declaration of Naziris even without a Nazir passing by. I mean, so from the fact that Shmuel says the reason he's a Nazir when he says Ehe is because someone was walking in front of him, then it must be that yes, Yadayim she'ena mechichas, right? Because why do you need a nazir to walk by you if you have an unclear yad? When someone says hey, it should be enough. Elamai, and I just saw a picture today. There's a singer in the Goyish belt. Her name is Elamai. Someone said Elamai, M-A-I, and I said Elamai, so I associated that thought with that, but nothing to do with this Gemara. So let's see, does Shmuel Taka hold that way based off of what he says?
There's also a Lipa.
Lipa, what does Lipa say?
No, there's also a singer Lipa.
Lipa,
Yeah.
Lipa, and Kedi, not a singer, Tana. Okay, Amira, Omri. So they say, the scholars of the academy, Azay Zok the Rashba, Bisman Shenazir over Lefanav, when a Nazir is passing in front of him, Leka L'Sapuka B'Milsa Achrina. The declaration is not absolutely clear, yet it cannot really be confused with another matter, because it was made when a Nazir was passing by, so it's more likely that the declaration is for Nazir stand to fasting. But if a Nazir is not passing by in front of him when he says we could say that perhaps he's declaring a state of fasting. Therefore, the Mishnah to explain is referring to a case in which a Nazir was passing by, and when the vower made a partial declaration of I shall be. So I think the Gemara is saying, don't say Shmuel holds Yadayim Shedim Mechichas Loi having Yadayim, because you're dealing maybe with a case of Yadayim She'ena Mechichas. And still, in this case, he's a Nazir. The fact that someone's walking by and he says Ehe doesn't make it a case that it is no longer ambiguous. Meaning, what did Shmuel say? Shmuel said that, the reason...
I'm not sure what Shmuel said. All he said was the reason you're Nazir because there was a Nazir walking by.
So let me ask you a question. In a case where a Nazir is walking by, do you say that this person is now a Nazir because it was not unclear, that it was not ambiguous?
Because it was not ambiguous, honestly.
So, okay.
Using negating.
When this guy walks by, is it 100% clear that this is what he means?
It's pretty clear.
It's pretty clear, but it's not fully clear,
it's
right?
Not fully clear.
So don't bring me a proof. The Gemara tried to bring me I think this is what maybe the Gemara is saying. Don't bring me a proof that, Shmuel holds that the reason you need somebody walking by is because if they didn't walk by,
Loi Havi Yadayim,
that if he, I got stuck in the thought. The Gemara said that, Shmuel says that you need someone to walk by in order for the person to be a Nazir. So if that's the case, is the reason you need someone to walk by because if someone says Ehe, and that guy didn't walk by, then you wouldn't know what he's talking about, and that's not enough.
Right. You wouldn't know. Yeah.
Right. But now, the Gemara assumes in this question that if once you have someone walking by, it no longer is unclear. It's no longer unclear. I have to use that double negative because that's important here.
Okay, I think what you're trying to say is you can't prove that he holds Yadayim She'en Mechichas Loi Having Yadayim.
Right, because this is still a case of ambiguity. This is still a case of unclearness.
Because even this case is Yadayim She'en Mechichas.
Right.
And yet we're still saying Havi Yadayim.
Right.
We actually are saying this case, which is potentially ambiguous,
that he's a Nazir.
That he still is a Nazir.
He's still a Nazir. Meaning, outside of him writing it down, a case like I just said Ehe and I meant Nazir. I don't know if that's
it's still not 100%.
It has to be verbal, maybe. Outside of that, it's still not 100%. The likelihood is more, but don't bring me a riot from here that Shmuel holds a certain way because of that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But what's the purpose?
But the Gemara asks, "V'dilma loy feitre min karbanaisav kamar." Perhaps he means only to pater the Nazir passing by from his karbanais chiyuv, and he's not adapting Naziris.
The guy saying
This guy's saying ehei, even though he's saying I shall be, and there's a Nazir walking by. Oh, when he says ehe and this guy's walking by, all he means is the same way he has a carbon, I'm going to also take upon myself a carbon. Meaning maybe there's some similarities associated with.
So why live Paitre min carbonizing?
Okay, that's a good question. But perhaps he means only to exempt the Nazir passing from his. Even though the partial declaration of I shall be made while a Nazir is passing by is associated with the Nazirs as opposed to fasting, doesn't necessarily indicate an adoption of Nazirs. Perhaps when he says I shall be, should be completed as I shall be subject to his sacrificial liability and not as I shall be a Nazir. The declaration would still refer to Naziris, but the person would not be declaring himself a Nazir. He would only be making a commitment to supply the passing Nazir with the animals the latter needs for his Naziris sacrifice. So he's saying, I'm going to pater you from having to find the carbon and all that. I will supply it for you.
Okay.
That's what he means when he says, hey. The Mishnah, so the Gemara says, so why does it say that person is a Nazir? The Kamar Beliba, the Mishnah must be speaking of a case where he says afterwards that he had in his mind to become a Nazir.
So you're saying since he said it in his mind, what did he say in his mind? Or in his heart?
So this case where he says ehe, it makes the person himself a Nazir, right? Because maybe he's talking about the Kamanis. The reason the Mishnah says he is a Nazir because of two things. One is he made the declaration while the Nazir was passing by, and B, he, by the way, later on said that, when I said ehe, I meant that I wanted it to be a Nazir.
So he explained,
meaning Beliba is not enough,
right?
And he must have made some oral expression associated with the Naziris.
But he basically was able to clarify his original
The fact that you said ehe when it happened, I don't think you have that nemanis when a Nazir's not walking by you. So this fact that you said ehe and the Nazir walked by you and later you clarified, that's enough for us to be maida. On the flip side, you'll say, hey, if he wants to be another, let him just say it again. But it's the time in between, meaning if he drank wine after that, before his clarification, is he over? The answer is yes, because he said ehe, and then he later clarified, and a Nazir was walking by when he said it. Ihachi, if so, that the case is talking where someone made his attempt, he made clear his intent. What is there to say? What's the Mishnah teaching us? Right?
You're saying obviously,
if he said that, by the way, I said ehe, he walked by, and by the way, when I said ehe, you're not sure, I'll tell you what I meant. Right? So let's see why. What does the Mishnah have to say? That since we need his words and his thoughts to coincide, you might think that you need to be very specific. Mashmallah, and therefore it teaches that a sufficient oral expression of the person's intent is enough. You might think that the explanation of his thoughts and his words all have to be his mouth and his heart.
Right.
That when he says ehe, the fact, you might have thought that when he's thinking it, he has to say it.
You might have thought that.
He
doesn't. But only if the guy's walking by.
Right.
If he's not walking by.
Correct. I think, right? You still need that person to walk by.
Yeah, Rashi says that. If he's not walking by, then you don't say that ahe means that, because that's very far from Pivli.
Right.
He's not even saying it.
Okay, we're going to do a drop more to finish off Beis Amid Beis. Ahi nahi Nazir. If someone says, I should be handsome, he is a Nazir. Maybe he means I should be beautiful before Hashem as it pertains to the mitzvahs. I want to be
esrog. It'd be beautiful esrog.
Beautiful esrog, or I want to be handsome in the sense I want to be pure. I want to look good by davening. I don't want to look like a shlump. I want to look like I'm put together. Meichatesi. Gedetanya, as I was taught in the Brisa, Ze Eli, Ze Keli, Va'anvehu. The pasuk says, "This is my God, and I will beautify him." The pasuk means I shall beautify myself before him in the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. Just like you said, I should make before him a beautiful sukkah, lulav na, tzitzis na, echdei lefanav sefer Torah na, ve'echrechenu b'shira'in naim, and I shall wrap it in beautiful silks. So you see here that beauty can be related to the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. Why do we think that when someone says, I shall be handsome,
should be a Nazir,
that he should be a Nazir? Now, one can say a Nazir was walking by him, right? Like that would be, I don't know if that's where the Gemara is going, but like that would be an answer that we took from the previous Gemara. Context, right? Omar Shmuel, this is the second time in this block we've heard from Shmuel. Shetafis b'saira. The Mishnah is referring to a case where he grasps his hair, I'm assuming his own hair, the Omer and No'eh, and it says, I shall be handsome. The fact that he's grasping his hair as he makes a declaration indicates that he's referring to Naziris and not to enhance fulfillment of the Gemara in general. So, I could say also that, like, he wants to be handsome, to present himself nice in the base medrash. You know, why is...
Because he's saying, what's the word? No. Here.
No. I shall be handsome.
I should be
so
handsome.
I guess you have like before we said that.
Right, but he's holding his hair. The handsome of the hair means I want it to grow. You said about the commercial.
Right.
It's about growing the hair.
Right. Like if you say I should be handsome by itself, it could mean many different things. Once you bring the hair into this, that's almost like having the Nazir walk by. That's the act.
It's not 100%.
Right. You wouldn't. Oh, you think the Gemara's going to ask the same question as about Shmuel?
I think it would sound like it should be similar.
Right. So the Gemara has a new question. Nazir milsa dadera. To be a Nazir is a sinful matter. V'amrinan le'noah. Or the Gemara is saying to be a Nazir is a sinful matter. The notes here says that the present assumption is that abstention from permissible things such as wine is regarded as sinful. So, right, Hashem's giving you a beautiful product, and you're saying I'm abstaining from that. Don't Hashem made things for a reason. It's not an avera to drink wine.
Jews really don't believe in abstinence from what
right.
Hashem is trying to give us.
So Gemara's puzzled. You're going to say we call the fact that you're refraining from things beautiful. We're calling it handsome. Can the locks of a Nazir be referred to as handsome when they're the consequence of a wrongful act, the adoption of Nazirus? Umar says on Gimel Amud Aleph, yes, they can be referred to as handsome. Da'afilu l'Rabbi Elazar HaKapar da'amar Nazir chayte. Because even according to Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, who says that a Nazir is a sinner, that is only Hanimili Gabe Nazir Tameh. That's only referring to a Nazir who became Tameh. The Aide Devoy Mister, since he needs to forfeit the days of Naziris he observed prior to becoming Tameh. Like, I think Naziris has a certain amount of time if you don't say how long you want to be a Nazir for, or like there's a certain time period. But if you mess up, like if you it counts sphere, you don't have to like start again. But in this case, there's a reset clock, right? The Amar Rachmana v'Hayamim Harishanim Yiplu Ki Tamei Nizar, but the first day shall be forfeit, whereas Naziris has become Tamei. Hassam who it is there concerning a Nazir who became Tamei that Rabbi Elazar called him a sinner. That's where the Avera is. Someone who messed up in his Naziris. He drank wine and he became tummy. Now he has to start again, and he forfeited that time. And that time, losing that time, is a sinful act. Aval Nazir tar, but a Nazir who does not become Tomei, lav choite kroive. He's not called a sinner, not even according to Reb Elazar Hakaper, and that is who is handsome, this Nazir tar. So, with this act comes great responsibility, and those who fulfill it all its days are considered handsome, and that is who the Mishnah is referring to when it talks about long hair as being handsome, a Nazir Tahar.
So are we actually, because I always remember my Rebbeim saying, yeah, you're not supposed to be a Nazir. Are you saying now it's actually is a good thing?
That is an excellent question. That is why I was very intrigued by Rabbi Eli Stefansky's sit-down with an actual Nazir today. I thought that, A, it didn't even exist in today's times, but apparently it does. Not only that, there's also a beauty related to it, but I don't know if your Rav would suggest it. If you are seeking additional holiness, I don't know if that would be his first suggestion, but for someone that has sought out all other possibilities and wants to become a Nazir, just remember you are entering an arena in which men are created from, but those men could become sinners if they don't see through their period of Nazirs.
Rabbi Eli.
Thank you. We're going to stop here. Kol Tov.